I'm 24 years old and I'm at the table with the CEOs of our companies in our town that are all in unison trying to make our community better. I still think back and think about how like these business leaders engaged with me. They didn't treat me like I was like some numbskull, like some little 24-year-old, what are you doing here? They treated me like I belonged at the table. That was doing the work, and they just were very respectful.
Well, welcome to the Engineered Success Podcast, where we talk to business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders just like you and I that are on their journey to understanding what success is for them and the best path to get there. I'm excited today to be joined with Rick Baker. So Rick, thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit of your background and your story. I mentioned as we were getting started that we were going to go right there, right? We were going to get started with your childhood and build up on what's gotten you to where you are today. But paint us a picture of Rick Baker growing up.
Yeah, I think most people, when I tell them about my childhood, they are a little surprised. So I grew up in a very rural part of Minnesota on a dairy farm. My high school, I graduated with 18 kids in my class. So that gives you a little bit of a picture of the size of community we lived in. And my parents were also small business owners. So we worked a lot because the dairy farm is very labor intensive, as you know. And so kind of grew up getting up early in the morning and doing chores and doing things before you went to school, and then doing it all over again when you get home from school. And my parents were off at work during the day, running their businesses and doing that kind of stuff.
So they were dairy farmers on top of running their own businesses.
Yeah, it's interesting because so they started a construction company, and I was probably about 10. And I think that's some of it's where I get some of my passion for serving small business, because those conversations at the dinner table of, you're 10, but you're old enough to engage in the discussion. And it's like, we have payroll on Friday and we need new equipment and, those kind of small business discussions. But I think that's where a lot of the passion for serving the small business comes from. But yeah, they worked all day too. And we had to do the farm work and all that kind of stuff when you got home from their jobs and when we got home from school. And we pretty much worked from sun up to sundown every day.
So really instilling that work ethic, not only when you're at work, you work, but when you're home, you still have responsibilities, around the farm and things that you need to do to be able to, provide for the family. And as part of the family unit, that's what you needed to do.
Yeah. There's it doesn't stop when you're on a farm or a small business owner, and they have both. So it's kind of a 24/7 kind of life, really, because you do sleep, of course, everybody has to, but stuff happens in the middle of the night, and you got to go deal with it. So,
were you an only child, or did you have?
No, I'm the oldest of five.
Five, okay.
There's quite a spread in age. My youngest sister's 17 years younger than I am, and so we're kind of spread out. But I'm the oldest one of five, so, probably the smartest of the group.
Yeah, they'd argue with you probably on that. But as you were 10 years old, you were probably the first one to take on some of those responsibilities around the farm, right? First one to help, mom and dad with the things around the house. Yeah,
it's so interesting because, when the farm kids have a lot of responsibility, they really do, including, I drove, probably shouldn't admit it, but I drove trucks and things when I could barely reach the pedals, and tractors and that kind of stuff. And because my parents had the business, in the summertime when you're baling hay and you're doing crops and you're doing all that kind of stuff during the day, I was doing that. My dad wasn't home. He was working at his company. And so I would take care of hiring help that we needed to bale the hay, and I would be running the tractor and baling. And so you do have, you have a lot of sense of responsibility and a lot of responsibility placed on you at a very young age. And I do think kids are capable of rising to the occasion, maybe more than we give them credit for.
100%. As I think about my childhood, I wasn't raised directly on a farm. My grandfather owned property next to us, and there was cattle there, and we were baling hay and things like that. And I can remember times with him or times with my father. We'd go out and just ride in the tractor kind of thing, or go out and help hay bale, whatever. As I was a little bit older, but when I was in high school, then I worked on a farm, kind of full time throughout high school, and got some of those examples of what you're describing. So even though my childhood was a little bit different, I definitely can understand, what you had the opportunity, how you had the opportunity to get that work ethic as a 10-year-old. And then the conversations around the dinner table are interesting to me as well. Now, with the construction business between your father and your mother, did they own that together? Where it's the same business, or did they have separate businesses?
Yeah, I would say, I said businesses. My mom did daycare as well. Because why not? Like,
I already got 5.
Yeah, whatever. And so, but she worked in the business as well. She did, the financials and the bidding, the billing and all that kind of the back of the house things. And my father did the bidding of the projects as well as then managing the crew and stuff on site.
It's exciting for me to hear you talk about the dinner table and, you picking up on some of those things that they were talking about from the entrepreneurship standpoint from when you were 10. We have some of those conversations around our home and have a 7-year-old. So sometimes I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm scarring him for his future because we are talking about some of these things. But you felt like you learned some skills from
Oh, my gosh. I'm so glad to hear that you're having those conversations. I think it's valuable. I cherish those memories, and they come flooding to the front. Every time I have a conversation with any small business owner, it's like I can relate to where they are, because I can almost see myself at their dinner table and they're having those conversations, and just the risk that they're taking, and the fear sometimes, and like, how are you going to problem solve and do that kind of stuff? It's like, yeah, I know, I can relate to them because I was sitting at that table as a child and listening to that. And not just at 10. I mean, they still have the company. They still have the company now. My brother's been running it. I think it's great that your child's hearing those conversations.
Yeah, sometimes you also think it's like, oh, maybe I need to paint a really good picture. There's both. There's the good and the bad. You're kind of problem solving, right? And I think he's learning a lot of that, which is great. And as you've experienced both the hard work of your parents from farm life and had the opportunity to get involved in that early on, and then you had school going on at the same time, can you tell me a little bit about your school experience at that age, 10, 11?
Yeah. So we would get up early and work hard, and then have breakfast, and then go to school, and then come home and work hard, and then have dinner, and maybe go to bed. Yeah. And maybe there was some more farm work that needed to be done. I still cannot get up in the morning and just eat breakfast. I have to be up for a while. And I think that's maybe just a habit of my body or something. Is like, I have to be up for a couple hours before I can have something to eat. So it's interesting, how that kind of has lingered. I'm sure I could have retrained my body had I wanted to. But so interesting things, habits that you create, from the very beginning and carry with you.
So with that type of schedule when you were young, did you have time for sports or other things? Or was it pretty much that was the regiment and the schedule that you stayed consistently on for a long time?
No, I think our parents were very keen on us doing other things too. It wasn't like, child labor, that kind of stuff. I mean, we worked hard and we were all expected to contribute, but it didn't feel like an obligation, or like it didn't feel like something we didn't want to do. But there was time for us if we wanted to do sports. I did some sports early in, when I first started, like 7th grade or whatever, but I was more about like, I kind of enjoyed working and making some money better. So I kind of, I didn't go that track, but both my brothers were heavily involved in sports, and both my sisters were as well.
So you mentioned at that age, already at 7th grade, you were looking at opportunities to make money. What was that like?
So the way my parents allowed us to, as a dairy farm.
Okay.
And so I bought 2 cows of my own. And so in exchange for the work that I was doing on the farm, they provided the feed and, all that kind of stuff. Okay. But I got the money from the milk that my 2 cows produced. So
Got it.
I don't know, pretty young age. I was making $400 or $500 a month, um, and
That's
putting
awesome.
that away. And then I would work for neighbors and do some stuff as well.
I wonder, and maybe you remember this, if that idea for you to get your own cows was your idea or something that your parents brought up and kind of said,
I
like, hey,
think it
is
was
this?
mine. I don't think
Yeah.
any of my siblings did that,
Okay.
that I recall. Maybe one of my brothers did. We all had different kind of roles.
Fun.
I milked the cows, so I would milk the cows. My other brother was more like, well, he took care of calves and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And so I think it was my idea. I don't recall exactly, but it's, as I reflect back now as we're having this conversation, what a great also kind of sense of responsibility of going to the auction or going, to go buy the animal, and the thought process and the research and like figuring out which one you want to buy and that will be a good producer and,
Mm.
and those kinds of things. And yeah, it's kind of a additional responsibility that.
Yeah. And you learned that from going with your parents
Yeah.
and watching them. And
Yeah. Again, I keep harping on, I feel like that the responsibility that they gave us. And as I got older and had a driver's license and I could legally drive on the roads, and again, my dad was at work during the day and we were building the farm. I would go to auctions. Like they trusted me to go to these auctions of farmers that were selling and maybe retiring or whatever the reason they were selling. And like, you go buy the cows that we need for our farm and bring them home and write the check and do all that stuff. And it's like, now if I think back, like you're 16 years old, it's like, that's kind of crazy level of
Yeah.
trust that they had.
Well, it must have worked out more times than it didn't.
It must have.
Yeah.
I think, there's a couple of times I can think of that. It's like, yeah, maybe not the best decision, but it's also kind of interesting. I don't know if you've ever been to an auction, but the auctions can have like there's like it pulls you in emotionally, and like, cause you're competing, and it's like being, having the ability to know when it's time to stop versus like just, maybe overpaying for something. I can remember those feelings of like, maybe if I just go one more time, I'll win. And it's like, no, I think this is my limit. I need to stop here. This is my limit. So it's kind of fun to revisit those thoughts.
Yeah, and that's a skill set that maybe some of us need a little bit more of today. Grab that from Rick when he was buying cows, right? Yeah. No, I love that. Thanks for breaking that down. And then you're 16. You're taking care of the cattle. You're milking the cows. You're taking care of the farm. You're also going through high school then at that point, and you're not doing as much sports, but you were involved in different things. What was you were interested in business, but what other interest did you have at 16, 17?
So, it's so interesting. I think that all of us can have such a tremendous impact on a person, maybe even just a couple of words you say to them and maybe never know. My uncle, who's not with us any longer, I remember having a conversation with him at somewhere in there, like, I don't remember exact age. And he had like a typical question that you would ask a kid, I guess, is like, what do you think you want to do when you for a job when you grow up? I'm like, I don't know. And everybody just thought I was going to be a farmer. Because I was probably, of my siblings, probably the deepest into it. And he said, well, my mom's an accountant. You should really think about that. They're great jobs. They make a lot of money. You should think, explore that. That was the seed. I'm an accountant. That's my education. And actually from that point forward, it was a small high school. But they were very, accommodating as far as like business courses. I took every single business, finance, accounting class that my little high school offered. Sometimes because it was so small, I was the only kid in the class, but they still offered it.
Wow.
I remember taking, accounting 2 with Mrs. Burke, and I was the only one in the class, and she said, you're starting to push, like my knowledge limits here, but I've talked to the banker. We had one bank. I've talked to the bank president, and he said that he's willing to answer questions that you have, that if it's beyond what I have the capability of answering. I just think that's such a cool like that the town, the teacher in the town, the school, like said, they didn't put up barriers or limitations. They just made stuff available.
Yeah, and they understood that this was your interest and that you wanted to dive deeper into the specific topic and, hey, what doors do we need to open for Rick to be able to do that?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, well, too bad, fit into this box, right? You've got
this is what we have. I mean, they were offering the classes, so I signed up for them, and they didn't cancel them because I was the only one in it.
Did you ever need to talk to the banker?
I did a couple of times when down in, and this is a small town. And the fact that I could leave the building and walk to a few blocks to the bank and talk to him, is pretty incredible.
Now you're understanding more about accounting, you're getting more interested and deep in the topic, and then you're starting to look towards, a future, a career or college. Which path did you take?
So I went, yes, I did. Both at the same time.
Fair.
I chose to go to community college because I had to pay for it myself. My parents were not big into higher education. They weren't sure that it was necessary. And so they said, well, if you're going, you have to pay for it yourself. And so I wanted to keep working and pay as I went. And so that was my first 2 years. And then I started working, got a full-time job after that in a corporate office for a company in Rochester, Minnesota, which is like, I grew up in that area. I didn't go back for my last 2 years of education until I was actually in my first CEO role as a chamber CEO in Iowa. And I went at night and finished my last 2 years. It was like unfinished business that I wanted to take care of. It was kind of hanging over my head. But so that was my education path. I didn't have the traditional go to 4 years, stay in the dorms and do all that kind of stuff. It was like, go to school during the day, work at night, and, kind of keep everything going.
What were some of the biggest things you think you took out of the education side of those first couple of years?
Well, in accounting, especially in business, and like the technical skills to be able to, to know what you're doing and be able to be an asset for an employer, that you actually have the technical capability to do the work. You can't fake it in accounting. You either know how to do it or you don't.
You can fake it for a little while and then you get in trouble.
While, and then somebody's going to find that something's not balancing out, and then there's going to be more problems.
Yeah.
But, the technical skills to be able to get in the door and then grow and learn more as you go.
Yeah, 100%. And I think back to, I went to school for engineering, and even my time in school when I started my first business, some of just having the degree and, having some of that behind me helped me build a little bit more of a reputation, and people had a little bit different level of trust, with someone just starting their business. Well, at least they've got, that degree, a little bit of experience behind them. We can trust that they're going to get this done at this level. So you went to community college for a couple of years. Now you're getting into the full-time accounting. What's something that came in about that you were a little bit surprised of, like, hey, this isn't what I expected with the role, or it's the same?
Oh, that's an interesting question. When you're first in it, or at least when I was first in it, I was glad, with the education that I had, that I got a job. But it was in the early 80s, and so the economy was a little rough. My first job with accounting was in a corporate office for a food company. They had 3 lines of business. They had a chain of restaurants, they had catering, and they had vending.
Okay.
And they were different company names, but all under the same ownership. And the food industry is always tough. But we were, we were going through some troubles. And I think that may have been the biggest eye opener, just being on the end of, I was on the payables. And so the bills that need to be paid, if we weren't paying them, I got the calls, and you're like 20 something. And it's like, we're going to switch you over to cash on demand, on delivery, if we don't get some invoices paid and that kind of stuff. And it's kind of interesting to deal with that.
I can imagine what's going through your mind, especially coming from the experience of understanding small businesses from your parents' perspective, and sitting at that dinner table and understanding their scenario of, okay, we got to make payroll. And then you're on the other end dealing, maybe some of your vendors are small businesses, right? And the impact, and, that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting as you kind of played some of that back. It's like, as a child, you don't realize what you're learning. Sometimes it's not until later that it comes back and it's like, oh, I was learning something, at the dinner table and seeing how all these things play together. And now I'm in a company and you're like, I feel like something's not quite right here. Like, what's not happening and what could we be doing differently that would make us function better as a company?
That's why it's important that we're having this conversation and other people are having conversations together, because we don't know what each other's backgrounds, perspectives are coming from those dinner tables that they had, years and years and years ago. And that's going to give them maybe a different perspective on the conversation that they're having today. And that's going to yield towards stronger businesses in the future, right? So now you're in corporate America, you're dealing in accounting. And then you mentioned that you got into chamber world shortly thereafter, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes. So I worked in that company, I think, for about 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
And then I saw this posting it was the finance person for the Rochester Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
I think I was 24 years old at the time. And I didn't know what a Chamber of Commerce was, I actually kind of thought it was part of the city, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'll never have to worry about money again. Because again, I was getting the calls from vendors, Little did I know it was a not-for-profit. But so I went to the chamber there and as their finance person, and just kind of fell in love with the work of the Chamber of Commerce right away. It was so interesting. Well, first of all, it was kind of interesting. When you're 24, you're kind of the when it comes to technology and that kind of stuff, I knew it the most. So we kind of transformed things and made them more automated. And it took what was a full-time job it took a lot less time. So I started taking on different responsibilities and leading programs and volunteers and membership development and different things like that, in addition to the financial reporting and accounting stuff, because we put it on the computer.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And so I just fell in love with the work, and it's like, I'm sitting in the middle of, I'm 24 years old, and I'm at the table with the CEOs of our companies in our town that are all in unison trying to make our community better. Like, what an amazing job. And I would talk to my friends and be like, oh, I met your boss today. And they thought it meant their manager, but no, the owner of the company that you work for, and it's like, I don't know that I'm still to this day, that's not lost on me, that I get to be at that table with the people that want to make our city better. What a great career I've had.
Yeah. And as you're thinking of that first chamber, what was the size of that chamber and what was it like? I'm not too familiar with Rochester area.
So Rochester, Minnesota is a very white collar community. It's a Mayo Clinic is its largest employer. They also have a large IBM facility. So very white collar, high education, high income community. But there's manufacturing and a lot of other diversity in the economy as well. We had about 1,000 members, I think, of the chamber, and maybe 10 or 12 staff members.
Okay.
So, a nice mid-size community. I think the population of the area is about 150, 200,000, somewhere in that range.
And then as you started to get involved in the chamber and learn more about, being at the table with other business leaders that are interested in building out the community, what are some of the things that maybe were aha or eye-opener for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, one thing that's maybe small potatoes, but I still think back and think about how, like, these business leaders engaged with me. They didn't treat me like I was like some numbskull, like some little 24-year-old. What are you doing here? It treated me like I belonged at the table. I was doing the work, and they just were very respectful, and that's still kind of interesting to me. Like, I think back to the farm, and I was talking about going to the auctions or working with the veterinarian. Like, these are adults, but they're interacting with a 16-year-old, but they didn't treat you like you didn't know what you were doing.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that is because of those types of people, or is it because of the way that you presented yourself in those situations?
It's very interesting to reflect back and ask that question.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know, maybe I was carrying myself with confidence or something and just like I knew what I was doing. At least I pretended I knew what I was doing. But yeah, I'm very appreciative of those
Yeah.
people, like just letting me at the table and not treating me like somebody that didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, and just a reminder to those that maybe are working in some of those environments, like just not to be afraid of being at those types of tables, right? Not
And
to feel like, hey, you're too young or you don't have the right experience, because there are a lot of just really good people out there in the communities that want to get other perspectives involved, but also just want to pour into others and mentor others too in some scenarios.
I had a lot of what I would say unofficial mentors. They didn't know it, but I was watching them. I don't know. I've had a few like official mentors, where they know they're playing that role, and I have, specific conversations. But I've had the privilege of just watching a lot of people work and how they deal with people and how they lead in different situations, and just kind of learn from them. And and I always had so much respect for all those people sitting at that table. And maybe they saw that in me and said, all right, well, let's mentor him a little bit and bring him along. And if he makes a mistake, we'll let him know. But appreciative of what they did.
Yeah, and that's exciting to hear that you had the opportunity to have mentors in your life that were pouring into you in that way. And I've had some of these conversations in the past where it's like, okay, it's one thing to ask for a mentor, but then at the end of the day, they're not going to come back and continue to mentor you if you're not coachable or if you're not someone that absorbs and then changes, right? And they can see, oh, my time, put into, spending time with Rick is actually turning out to be a, positive outcome on his life or something like that.
Yeah,
so coming back and doing what they say, right?
Yeah, and I think if you appreciate that they have experience that you can learn from, I mean, that's a compliment to them too. And like they get some fulfillment out of sharing that. I feel like I know I do. If somebody asks, sits down with me and asks me to like share something with them, it's rewarding. Yeah.
But it's as 20s, 16, 20, 25, sometimes you get into those conversations and you're confident, right? You're like, oh, I know a lot. You haven't maybe sometimes you feel oh, I don't know what I don't know, but sometimes you get into those with too much confidence. So the fact that you jumped into those tables and those conversations with a clarity of, hey, I don't know everything and I'm willing to ask questions and get curious, that's probably what people picked up on. It would be my assumption. But
yeah.
Now, as you're getting into this role into Rochester Chamber, and then you're growing throughout the organization, what was next for you?
So once I kind of figured out that I liked the Chamber of Commerce industry, then it was like you really kind of have to move to grow. I mean, you can, if it's a large enough community like Grand Rapids, and you want to wait long enough for someone to move on, you could grow, but you kind of need to move communities. And so I started looking at what opportunities might be out there for like a small first chamber to be small to take on. And so then I moved to Newton, Iowa, which is right outside Des Moines. And that was my first CEO, executive director role. 300 members, one myself and one other staff person. But it was a great learning opportunity. Maytag was headquartered there when they were still existed as a company. So great opportunity to learn a lot and lead an organization from top to bottom, pretty much. Other than what my executive assistant / receptionist / bookkeeper did, I did everything.
You had
else.
all the other hats on.
Yeah, she did a lot, but between the two of us, we did everything. I mean, if it happened, we did it. And it was a great opportunity, great learning opportunity for both of us.
Yeah, and that's a big step in just ownership of, like we talked about, all the different roles and all the different responsibilities. Yes, you had the accounting background, which probably really helped you in that scenario, right? Be able to understand, okay, how do we keep a chamber this size afloat and continue to be able to support businesses at this level? That was helpful. But then you're in, just all different levels of conversation being in a chamber that size. What were some of the things that you've connected with that you're like, oh, I really love this, like this side of it that I hadn't experienced before?
from being in the leadership role
Yeah.
for the first time, I think the leadership of the board more, it's because in Rochester I was a staff person, so the CEO had the board relationship. I would present to them on a project or a program, but he maintained that relationship. So then, building that relationship with the business leaders and my board members, and I think that's when I maybe first felt the value of connections and the role the chamber plays, especially like the people who work at the chamber, the number of people we know and how we can connect them, and the value of those people to make that connection for them. I think that's when I first actually that kind of aha happened of like, oh, this is a big piece of what we do. And there's a lot of value to those people when that happens.
Did you enjoy that part? Like
I
being the
love that
extrovert
part.
of like going in groups and being the connector?
Still love it. I love making introductions and connecting to people. And, it's, as I said, we as chamber employees, like we meet so many people, and we know so many people, and we forget they don't know each other. It's like, I remember introducing people that both had lived in those communities forever, and I was like newer, and I was shocked that they didn't know each other, and it's like, so we have to kind of constantly remind ourselves like, oh, I might know all these people, but it doesn't mean they know each other. Even on my board here and all along my career, I was like, getting them to know each other was valuable.
Well, and I think a lot of business owners and business leaders are looking for those opportunities to get connected too. They just don't know how, right? So they're welcome to, hey, thank you for making that connection, because I was looking for that. I just didn't know how to make it. And just coming from a founder background myself and getting into some of the different scenarios, it can feel lonely, right? Hey, how do I get connected? So I know getting involved in a chamber or something like that can help you. A business owner group or something can help you, because there are people out there that enjoy it, even if you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you're becoming the connector, you're getting more involved in the chamber, you're helping these businesses thrive and grow. What were some of the impacts that were exciting to you? I mean, you connected people, you were starting to see impacts and growth. Are there any success stories or things that you can share?
So in Newton, one of the last projects I worked on before I moved on to my next role, I mentioned Maytag was headquartered there. And this is back in the early 90s, I would guess. And this when they were just starting to make front load washers. And they had two washing machine factories, one in Newton and one in Southern Illinois. And they were going through a process as a company of like, which one of these is going to make the front load? And both communities were fearful, like whoever's making the top load, that's the old product. And eventually the old product's going to cycle out and you'll be left with nothing. And so we competed very hard with Southern Illinois community and won the opportunity to have our factory converted and to start making the front load washers. And that was felt like it was a big community-wide effort because Maytag was headquartered there. It was so much a part of the brand of the community. It was such a big win for the community.
Yeah, when you say fought really hard, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but a lot of people don't understand what goes into a decision like that.
Yeah, there's like, it was huge. We had a whole team of I want to say just a task force, I guess, but each person on that task force was leading a team of other people going deeper. For instance, you have just the financial, like what's the difference between we're operating in Illinois versus operating in Iowa? Like what can we do from the economic, what most people think of as the traditional economic decision-making process that a business would go through. But then there's these are human beings making decisions, and there's always an emotional side as well. And so we had one of the things that we did, and I don't know what our competitors did, but we had a giant community rally, like a pep rally, in the gymnasium of the high school. And then we had the executives of Maytag come in, and they were sitting in the front row. And I just think of the production that we did because we had people like yourself that had a talent of technology and video production and things like that put on this production of why, you know, they should do it in Newton, and the cheerleading squad created a cheer, like in the band, you know, it's like, it was a big deal. I still, Simply the Best, the song Simply the Best, it was a theme song that we had for that event. So anytime I hear it, it just takes me right back to that
Simply
rally.
the
It's
best,
like Simply the Best,
Yeah.
you know. And of course, Maytag always had like this brand of like just being the best, you know, best, you know, Maytag repairman, he's bored because it's a good quality. He never has to fix it. And so, you know, tying into that and just saying we are simply the best community for you to do this. And we won.
Thanks for telling that story. I know that a lot of times, like I said, people don't understand all that goes into the thought process. They just see something happen, right? And there's a lot of different people in play and different decisions that need to be made to make something possible, like that story. So what's next as we progress through your journey?
Yeah, so I'm kind of goal-oriented person. And so when I moved to Newton, I was like, I'm going to be here 3 years and then I'll be going to the next community.
Okay.
And it was almost 3 years to the date.
Is that common in that role, or that was just a goal that you had set?
Okay. I think for people that kind of get into the chamber industry and like find this as a career path, I do think then they do that as well. I'm not the only one. I was in a meeting just this week that somebody had said, I've been in 4 chambers. And I'm like, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So I was like 3 years and I'm moving to, I'll start thinking about the next one. And it was literally almost 3 years to the date. And I moved to an area called the Quad Cities, which is 4 cities, Davenport and Bettendorf, Iowa, and Moline and Rock Island, Illinois.
Okay.
They straddle the Mississippi River, straight west of Chicago, about the same distance we are from Chicago here in Grand Rapids. Interesting and kind of complex community. John Deere is headquartered there.
Okay.
There's also what many people are surprised to learn. There's also a significant military base there, about 8,000 civilian personnel and then uniformed personnel. It's on an island in the middle of the Mississippi River. I can't remember how many acres, thousands of acres of island. So it's kind of interesting. But being divided into 2 different states and 4 cities, and then you have the suburbs around there. It's about the size of Lansing, I would say, about 450,000 people. But being in 2 different states, and Iowa and Illinois are really polar opposites. You have this rural, conservative Iowa agriculture base, and then you have liberal, metropolitan Illinois, kind of influence. The Chicago influences the whole state. And so it was interesting in the chamber world, kind of at navigating that complexities of the community. And I always said that we did a lot of inter-squad scrimmaging between our cities. Our biggest challenge was getting everyone aligned to compete with our competitors outside the area versus competing, rearranging the deck chairs and, trying to lure someone's business from one side of the river, state line, to the other.
How were you able to do some of those things? Like, what were some of the ways you were able to get people aligned and on the same page?
So a couple of things that we did. So when I first moved there, there were 4 different organizations. There was Davenport and Bettendorf Chambers of Commerce. I was running the Chamber of Commerce that covered the Illinois side of the river.
Okay.
And then there was an economic development organization that covered the whole region. And so one of the first things I did on the Illinois side of the river, because there were actually 5 cities, there were only 2 major ones, but 5 cities that I worked with. So 5 different mayors and all that kind of stuff. And we convened a group of the 5 mayors, and then I had 5 business CEOs, kind of team up with them to create a unified economic development, community development strategy for our region. And had this one gentleman, the CEO of a company, he's just back to being a mentor, the unofficial, just watching him lead that complex process, and getting to the end. And we have this great product which delivered great results for our community. And people were, thanking him for his leadership. And I still remember to this day, his response was, well, I just found a great group of people who were going somewhere and I got in front of them. And so he just was so humble, deflected all credit to all the people. He didn't take any of the credit himself. And I just thought that's an amazing, inspiration to people want to follow them,
Yeah, and someone like that out in the front helps your job be a lot easier as you're pulling people around it.
He could, I think because he had that kind of personality, he had the trust of the mayors, something. He didn't have a financial interest or vested interest in like where this thing went. And he had the ability to kind of just pull them along and get into a great spot. And we did some good stuff as a result. We have, it was one of the longest projects I've ever worked on was the building of a public university campus.
Wow.
And we didn't have one. And we felt like we needed one. And that was an outcome of this strategic planning process. And we had two small private colleges, kind of like Aquinas or Calvin would be here, but we didn't have a public university, and we felt like we should have one. And today I can drive by the campus and see cars parked there and think, people are getting their education because of something that we worked on.
Yeah, that's extremely rewarding. And you mentioned that being kind of the longest project you worked on in Chamber Worlds. Wow.
15 years from start to finish.
Wow.
I remember, and if you don't mind me going down a rabbit hole, we went in Illinois. It's done a little bit differently. The state kind of owns a lot of those properties and the university properties and stuff. And so we went to the head of the Board of Higher Education and said we would like to build a public university in our community. And his response was, and I still remember it to this day, which I thought was such a great response. He said, well, you've come to me with a cure for which you have not diagnosed a disease yet. And he said, so here's what I'm going to do. He said, I will fund a higher education needs assessment. So we will fund that. And you'll do an assessment and determine the need for this, which came back then and said, we needed a public university. Yeah. And so then we went down the path of then you getting the funding to build the buildings and finding a university partner to operate it.
I think that's just a good reminder too. Thanks for telling that story of finding the need before, spending too much time on the solution. But a lot of, founders or inventors or people coming up with ideas, they get so married to the solution. And it's like, really understand your market, understand the problem, do that type of analysis to understand what the market needs, and don't be married too much to the solution, because the solution might morph or change a little bit depending on what the problem or the need is. In this case, it came back to exactly what you expected, right?
Yeah.
That helped lead towards justification of the change.
Yeah, and it is interesting because that's something that I learned from that process of like, well, you haven't actually proved that you need it.
And now that's probably one of the first steps that you take.
Yeah, you spend a little bit more time like, okay, like we think we have this good idea, but like, how do we test it? How do we know like this is really something that we need in our community? What research do we need to do?
So you were at that chamber for a while, the Quad City.
Yeah, I ran that chamber for 17 years.
Oh, wow.
My last 2 years, we spent merging all four of those organizations that I named earlier. And that was a really interesting process as well, because it's political. You have 2 different states, you have 4 different cities. Like, there's a lot of politics going on there. People always felt like their city was the best, and the other 3 could figure out who was in second place. And so there's just
that song in the back of their mind.
Exactly, right. And so it's that interesting dynamic. But and so we had 2 attempts at merging. The first attempt, they didn't ask myself or any of my colleagues, the CEOs of these 4 organizations, to be involved. They somehow, the volunteer business leadership in the community, felt like we would not like this idea and that we might somehow work against it or something. And so we would be asked to provide information, but we were never in the room when the discussions were happening and trying to craft it. And the mayors were dead set against, this merger because they were going to lose. It was a scarcity mentality that they were going to lose their chamber that was representing them. And so it eventually, the first attempt died, because there was so much pushback. It was, I don't remember the exact time frame, but then some of those business leaders came back around again and said, well, we would like to try, we just think this is a good idea. And we'd like to kind of go at this again. And mergers are hard, so it takes you away from doing other stuff. And I said, I don't know about my colleagues. I said, I'm willing to work on this, but you have to look me in the eye right now and answer 2 questions. I said, I get to be at the table because I'm not opposed to this. I will work to help make it happen. I won't work against it. So you have to trust me. And I said, secondly, when we get to the point of pain, and we will, there's going to be pushback, that you will push through the pain and keep going until we finish it. Because if you can't say that you're going to do that, we might as well not waste our time. And they said, we promise we will do both of those things. And so we went through the process and merged all 4 organizations. And I knew for me, I was at a point in my life, I was like, I'm ready for the next challenge anyway. So I'm not worried about losing my job. This will just make me even more marketable, right? You have a whole new skill set. And so we got the merger done, and the vote of the membership of all 4 organizations was, for some people, that was the finish line, but it was really just the starting line, because you then have 4 different teams that you're trying to pull into one. You have 4 different plans, 4 different financials. So we went through that process of consolidating all those, and into one team, one plan, one organization, and then Grand Rapids called.
Yeah. So as you're going through that process, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of politics, a lot of work that needs to be done there. It wasn't easy. What motivated you the most during those conversations to keep showing up, to keep fighting for it? Like, how did you get the drive to be able to support that conversation?
I thought it was the right answer too. I thought, we need one organization that's unifying this community, that around a consolidated plan, a little bit like what I talked about, just, doing for the Illinois side of the river, that if we had one consolidated plan, and what the business community said is, we're not doing this so we can write a smaller check. We're not doing this to save money. We want more results. And we will maybe even write a bigger check if we're getting better results. And so that was the motivator of we could probably accomplish more as a community. This is a really cool region, but we're fragmented. And if we were all together and stop the inter-squad scrimmaging, and we really get serious about competing, we could probably be really successful. That's what motivated me. I was like, what is this? What could we do as a team of 40 versus 4 teams of 10?
You understood the vision of what the potential outcome could be. And that's what it took to, drive you to help rally everyone around to make that happen.
Yeah. And I think, myself and my colleagues, I'm not sure I appreciated this at the time. But, I had been there 14, 15 years by that time. And so you've earned people's trust that you're not leading them down a path of,
and then you're out. Yeah.
Right. And so I think as I think back, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, like, I'm sure we had a big influence on people, like, if they think this is a good idea and they're the ones whose jobs are potentially at risk, then why should I be opposed to this?
I think that as, business leaders involved in chambers and different individuals involved in the community, as long as they're understanding that others have the best interest for the greater good in mind, then they're willing to dive in and, hey, what do we need to do? And you've seen that time and time again. And then you mentioned you moved up here to Grand Rapids area.
I did. We the timing was perfect. I always thought, and I told them through the whole process, I think you need new people, You need, I've been in the Illinois side of the river. The Iowa people viewed me as the Illinois guy, and vice versa for my other colleagues. I said, once we get this put together, we don't want to hand off like a chaos and a mess, but once we get it put together and it's in a good position, you need new leadership. You need some fresh people to come in and lead this. And that's when a recruiter from Grand Rapids called. And the timing was, like I said, the timing was good because we got that done. They've been 15 years working in that university, and they were breaking ground. And it's like, before we start something else that makes you want to see it finished, it was a good opportunity to explore something. And so, I didn't know anything about Grand Rapids. I wasn't really thinking about, moving further north, at this point in my life, but I'm really glad that I did. And the recruiter, who's still a good friend of mine, he's Bill Benson here in Grand Rapids area. He said, I think you should come and see Grand Rapids. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And I remember driving in to the community on January 26th of 2011, cold winter night. Most of us Midwest communities, it's not the best time to show up.
January, yeah.
Yeah. It's not our, if there's any other time of the year, you could probably find to show off a little bit better. But, and I still have the same feeling every time that I come in on 196 and you get to the top of the hill where you have the view of the downtown, and it's like, it's just beautiful. And it's like, this is legit. And come into town and spent the whole weekend. I did that in each of those communities. Whenever I moved, was like kind of spend a whole weekend secret shopping.
Yeah.
Like, does this community, do I want to live here? Does it fit with my personality? Because I think that, like in my role, I feel like my personality needs to align with that of the community. And just, I spent my whole weekend talking to people, like the baristas and the waiters and waitresses and customers sitting next to me at Tre Cucini downtown Grand Rapids having dinner by myself. And I talked to the people next door and I said, thinking about moving here, what do you think? And it was almost like someone was having a campaign. I thought the community had some sort of
following you around.
Yeah. And I was like,
how good's this recruiter we're talking about?
It's like, it was so crazy because every person literally said the same words. You will love it here. Like, that was their response. You will love it here. And like, this is really cool, because when you're in our business and you're selling the community all day long, that waiter or waitress or the barista can undo a day's work if they say the wrong thing to a prospective. They don't know who everybody is that they're waiting on. And maybe it's someone that the right place and us are trying to get to move here or to expand or something. And they could undo that work. And to know that this community was all on the team, like this would be awesome. So my mentality coming into the interview originally was like, well, this will be good practice, because I haven't interviewed in like 17 years. This will be good practice.
Rusty, we'll figure this out. Yeah.
But driving into the community and I'm like, I want this job. It switched like I want this job. I want to be in this community.
I really believe in the product and what we're going to be, selling and working on, because this community is what they say they are.
Yeah.
That's exciting. And then as you made the move and you got involved in the Grand Rapids community, what were some of the, biggest things that you're able to get involved with early on in some of those early days?
What I really appreciated, and it's again through my whole career, was just how, the response that I got from business owners and business leaders was also very similar. Is we want you to be successful. I picked up on the theme here very quickly. Like, this is a win-win kind of community. We're lifting each other up. It's not a scarcity mentality where like I need to pull you down so I can succeed. This community really looks for opportunities for both of us to win. And so that was a common theme I heard from people is, what can I do to help you? What can I do to support you? We want you to be successful. We want the chamber to be successful. And that was really rewarding. And then for them to, there's so much history to learn that's happened before you. And so you're coming in at a point in time as like, how do we build from here on out? And how do you jump on on the wagon and keep it going.
Building new connections. And I like what you said about, helping build each other up. Kind of reminds me of a saying, I can build the biggest building in town by helping others build theirs as well, not by tearing everyone else's down. And everyone else's just gets taller as you help each other out, right? And grow together.
Yeah, not every community has that mentality. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working in 4 communities, and they don't all think with an abundance mentality.
As you've been involved in these different communities, but also over the span that you've been involved in the chambers, what are some of the differences that you see from time, right? Are businesses having similar conversations today that they were, in the 90s? Or are they different, or kind of what are some of those things that you're seeing?
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities. Different issues or challenges ebb and flow. I mean, it can be talent for a while, and then maybe not talent, and maybe it's cost of healthcare or whatever. The different things, different challenges or hurdles, kind of ebb and flow. Business leadership, I think, is also unique in this community. The level of engagement, and the willingness of people at the highest levels to still engage in making their community better is unique to this region. And I think, having a high concentration of locally owned businesses is very helpful for us as a community to be able to. We always talk about fighting above our weight class. That engagement is kind of unique. I talk about the Quad Cities and John Deere being the largest employer, and they're a great employer, a great company. It's just that brand of excellence. It just permeates through the organization. That's publicly traded. They have quarterly results that they have to deliver, and their CEO is maybe not as accessible to be engaged in community stuff because he's thinking globally. And but our folks, even though they have global draws, things that are drawing on their time globally, they still are committed to engaging locally. And I think that's impressive.
And it's exciting to hear, but then also as you're, engaged in the Grand Rapids community today and you're looking towards the future, what are some of the things that excite you the most?
Yeah, I feel like there have been a couple of times where people have felt like, okay, like what could come next? Like we probably are reaching our climax here, but we keep showing, like now with these huge transformational projects going on downtown with the amphitheater and the soccer stadium, and to hear Carol Van Andel from Grand Action 2.0 talk about, like, from the destination asset studies, like, well, there's a whole list of things on this list, and we hope to kind of keep working our way down this list. That's awesome to hear.
You don't have 15 years.
No, I know. It's like, just keep moving, keep going. And the pace in this community is great. It's not taking 15 years to get something done. They're serious, and they put their shoulder to it and get it done, and then move on to the next thing.
No, it's exciting. It's exciting to see and, be a part of and hear your excitement about it as well. And as we're thinking, about your journey and kind of what's gotten you into the roles that you're doing now and your involvement in the community, the impact that you've had, and thinking through all of those, what are you most proud of? I mean, you mentioned the university, so maybe that is one of them, but kind of looking back through all of the different professional things that you've been able to accomplish, what are you most proud of?
Wow. Interesting question. I'm proud of something different, maybe in different communities. I mean, the Maytag thing was really, I'm proud of that effort in Newton. The merger and consolidation kind of stuff in the Quad Cities. Here, so far, what I'm most proud of, I think, is just the transformation we've had of our organization. I love hearing, and what sometimes for me, because I wasn't here, so all I know is like what I know now, right, of the organization. And we're 138 years old this year. And so we've done some incredible things over the history of the organization. But to have people say, wow, what's going on at the Chamber these days is like incredible. You guys are just everywhere, and you're growing and thriving, and you're, a hub of business activity for our region. So far, who knows what's to come, but that's probably one of my prouder moments of just the brand of the organization, the growth of the organization, the team that we've been able to put together. that are all mission-driven people that are really passionate about serving this business community. From the moment they get up until the moment they go to bed is like pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. And that you're getting that feedback too from the community as well, that they're seeing the changes and they're seeing that come to fruition for you. And as you're looking at the community, I'm curious if you have some stats around the Grand Rapids Chamber and some of the different businesses, just so people understand the type of community that's there.
Yeah, we have right now we're just a little over 2,900 businesses that are members of the chamber, and then of course they all have a lot of employees. And some organizations the individual joins, so it's an individual membership. But for the chamber, the business joins, and then any of their employees that want to be involved and engaged can be involved and engaged because the business is a member. So we have 2,900 businesses. We're on the we're in the upper size for chambers of commerce around the country, which I think surprises some people too, because you think, Dallas or New York or something. Dallas has 900 members. So,
wow,
now they may all pay more, and maybe their budget's bigger. I don't know, but they have 900 members. We have 2,900 members. To me, I like casting the net wider, because it means that we're serving more businesses and we have more people engaged, and they're part of like moving the boat forward and growing the community and being a part of that. I like having a lot of people involved, and so we have, I've tried to run every chamber like a business, and we run ours like a business, and so we're looking at our bottom line, we're looking at staff development, and how do we keep growing, and so. It's still, the 2,900 members is still a small percentage of the total businesses in the region. So we feel like we still have a lot of opportunity to grow.
Now the chamber runs on EOS, correct? When you say run like a business and things like that. So you have the entire team circled around the VTO, the vision of what you're looking for in the future, the next 3, 5, 10 years, and then also you're doing the L10 meetings and coming up with the different issues. I can imagine from a business that runs EOS, and the issues that we have on our issues list are probably a little bit different than the things that you guys are putting on yours, but probably similar in the fact that we're trying to grow and be more successful as a business.
We always say we're like the evangelical EOS disciples. We love EOS. We just think, I wish I would have found it earlier in my career. It is so impactful for us as an organization that I attribute a lot of what we've been able to do, because we adopted EOS, and it gives you focus, and it gives you a shared language that's not hard to understand. So the entire team can understand what you're talking about, and you have this shared, if you say IDS something, or it's my rock for the quarter, that they understand what you're talking about. And we have a quarterly town hall with our whole team, and each person kind of goes through, these are my rocks for the quarter, so everybody else knows what's important. And we'll have like 120 rocks that'll get accomplished in each quarter. And, we step back and look at the list on the wall and say, it's no wonder we're getting stuff done.
Yeah.
When the people see us getting stuff done, like if we accomplish 80% of these rocks, that's getting a lot of stuff done in our community.
You're seeing the traction, right?
That's coming out of
it. I've had the pleasure of having Scott Patchen and Ken Bogart on this podcast, and we've had some great conversations about the impacts that they're having in other businesses and things as well. And that's been amazing. And as you maybe are thinking back and talking to someone that's interested in getting into the chamber as maybe a career path, like what you've taken, maybe what's one piece of advice that you'd give to them if they're interested in getting involved in the chamber at the level of what you've gotten yourself into?
Oh, that's a great, because most of us stumble into it because we didn't even know there was such a thing. I think they should tell people there is a Chamber of Commerce. Andy Johnston on our team, who just finished, he just had his 20th anniversary with the Grand Rapids Chamber. He says that a lot when he's talking to a group of youngsters. It's like, people should tell you that this is a career option for you because it's amazing. What would I tell people, like how to get into it? Well, understand what it is and explore what the potential might be, and try to make yourself an asset. And so some of the people that we hire maybe been involved with us for a long time as a member, so they know who we are, and they understand it from a member's perspective. And we love that lens, because you can get, you can lose that lens, and so it's and the ramp of learning is a lot shorter, because you already know who we are, and you're engaged, from that outside perspective. But look for opportunities to engage. We always welcome people to the table.
And a step forward if you have dairy farm experience and your parents are entrepreneurs, right? Or is that not it?
that may be the long path I had to get here, but it's been a great path.
No, I'm curious, and we're going to dive into kind of the last question here. We always wrap up the conversation understanding, your drive and what your definition of success is. But at first, I just want to really thank you again for coming on the Engineered Success podcast and telling us about your story, your journey of your childhood, kind of those experiences that you had in those first careers, and even, the impact that you've been able to have in the different communities that you've been involved with. So thank you for all that work. And I'm curious now, what is your definition of success, Rick?
Gosh, that's such a big question. It almost feels like it's not a destination. To me, it's like those maybe milestones along the way. Like, that was successful. That went well. But as a personal, defining if I achieved it, I don't think I have yet. I feel like I'm successful in my career, but I don't know that it's not an end destination. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's probably maybe more of a feeling of am I delivering results for the organization, for the team members that we have, for the investors in our organization and the community? Are we delivering the kind of results that this community deserves? When we started down this transformation of our organization in about 2017, when we started EOS, and a lot of things were going on at the same time, but it was about transforming us, who we were as an organization. The North Star, so to speak, was, Grand Rapids keeps landing on the top 20 list of things. Like, this is a sophisticated business community. It's a dynamic region. They deserve an equally sophisticated and dynamic organization at the Chamber of Commerce. And so that was kind of our target that we're shooting for. And but I always think there's still room to keep going. And so I don't think it's a destination.
Become better each day and continue to grow and
That's
do
success.
The most of what you can, and nothing but the best, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Rick, for getting involved in this conversation and coming on the Engineered Success podcast. It's been great having you here. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.